Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool review for you guys from the brand Timex. Originally founded back in 1854 as a Waterbury clock company, then later transitioned into the U.S. Time Company around World War II before settling on the Timex Corporation name in the 1970s. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this is a traveler's watch. Some key characteristics into the language. When you're looking for something within the space, of course, you're going to want to find either a GMT or some type of world timer functionality so that you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is their newest release in terms of the Expedition North line, and this is the Expedition North GMT Titanium Automatic. It is built for adventurers who demand durability, functionality, and style in their timepiece. While taking some clear inspiration from the Tudor Black Bay Pro, I do personally feel they did enough to avoid being, a direct homage, at least by current industry standards. You can get this for $549 direct, and don't forget, you can actually get that 15% welcome discount like at any time. Just sign up with a new email, and they'll send that 15% discount to that email. I did use that discount on this watch. So I will say that it does work for this release. It doesn't work for every release. There are certain watches that are uneligible to get that, to use that 15% discount on, but this is not one of them. So you can get this slightly cheaper, and even though it is still brand new. So I think that's pretty cool. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, here it is. What you've all been waiting for. I think this was a really cool kind of release that came out of the blue, really no teasing. It just kind of dropped, and it was really cool. I think after that James Brand GMT release, I think we all kind of did expect at some point for them to do some level of a standard production variation, but I don't think anybody really expected that they would take it to this extent to where it was going to be very different. I mean, even a completely different case, which was very, very surprising. And then, of course, I think they did a nice job. I think, paying homage, of course, to the Tudor Black Bay Pro, but again, having enough things that are different. I mean, the box lugs, even just the use of titanium, sure, the indices, and then, of course, with the 3D kind of Lume blocks there, that's similar, but you don't have a snowflake hand or anything like that. Of course, the color ways are going to be a little bit reminiscent, and, I think that maybe the typeface, but other than that, again, I think they did a really nice job, and this is a very affordable watch at just, right about $550, $549 direct. And so let's go over some of the dimensions. So 41 millimeters in diameter, 13.5 millimeters thick, and that is complete height there, so that's including the bezel and the crystal. Lug to lug, 48 millimeters lug to lug, which some people might find maybe a little bit long, but I will say because of the stubby nature of the case, it does help it wear really nicely. It does have a full titanium construction, which is matte blasted. I don't know which grade because they didn't advertise. If they didn't advertise grade 5 titanium, I would say chances are they're just using grade 2. There's nothing wrong with grade 2 titanium. There's tons more expensive titanium watches that are made with grade 2 titanium. Grade 2 titanium is more of a pure titanium. Grade 5 is more of an alloy, so there's more things mixed in which do help with strength. So there's that. So yes, grade 5 is more premium. Grade 2 is nothing bad. It's still titanium. If anything, it's a pure titanium. For those titanium lovers out there, you might dig that. And I really do like this aesthetic with the matte blasted setup. I think it looks great. You think of something like EDC. Look at this beautiful smooth operator pen from Tactile Turn. Thing is gorgeous. And of course, in the matte finish, I think this just looks cool. I mean, also maybe something like a Sabenza, right? Chris Reeves. So, I mean, these are premium products, right? When you think about the grand kind of scheme of EDC. And the cool thing is now you have this cool, I mean, yeah, maybe it's not made in America, but it's an American brand, right? And I dig that. I like that you are getting that here. So big shout out, of course, to Tactile Turn and Chris Reeve. But yeah, just an example of, you know, what people really are enjoying in terms of kind of that carry. So I think the choice to do the matte blasted titanium is perfect, and this makes it very, very functional and flexible for those of you that are into EDC everyday carry. I think this is going to look really fantastic, with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing this probably all across Instagram when people do their flat lays and their different EDC shots. Now, another nice feature is they did a 120 click bezel. A lot of the times on these bi-directional bezels, they'll just be friction fit and there will be no clicks. So I think that's nice that they actually did put a click mechanism, because one, it just is ultimately more fidgetable, and also it just makes it a little easier to kind of get things nailed down, because you can go one click or another versus just kind of tracking. The nice thing about when it's friction fit is you can always get it to align, but in this case, I mean, it aligns well. So very nice. You guys can hear this. You got the 24-hour scale on there. So of course that's for when you are looking here. It says 10 a.m., right? And then essentially, let's say I was going to do some traveling. I was going to go to Texas, or, you know, if I'm in California. So if I was going to go to Texas, hey, a couple hours ahead, maybe you go to the East Coast, another hour ahead, and you'd be tracking that, of course, using the GMT hand and not the local hour. So this 24-hour style setup actually, I think, is very intuitive for this type of movement. And this is a Seiko Instruments NH34. So it's a collar style GMT. And honestly, these are the most prevalent GMTs on the market. These are the classic GMT style most brands use. It's only became, more in vogue to have the, I'd say the more travel forward flyer style GMT or traveler's GMT, which is going to mean that you can jump the local hour hand versus jumping the 24-hour hand. But one of the drawbacks of having a jumping local hour is typically you're going to lose the functionality in terms of a quick set date. So for most folks, getting a quick set date and then just managing your second time zone either via here, or then of course if you want to go to second or even third, I mean technically it would still be just a second time zone because you don't have a fixed 24-hour scale. But that's just one of those things. It's like anything. You're never necessarily going to use the tool for 100% of the time just for its specific purpose. Most of the time, you're just going to use this as a standard tool watch. And then, of course, you do get the nice bonus of being able to track a secondary time zone and then calculate other time zones with relative ease. So I do appreciate that. Also, the crown is screw down. This is another feature I think is a little bit Tudor-like. Not in scale because it's a bit small, but in terms of the way that they did the grip there, the tactile engagement, it does definitely give you a bit of a Tudor vibe. As you guys can see with kind of that coin edging there. I think they did a nice job. It would be nice if it was a little bit taller, like wider. I don't need it to stick out. I think it feels really great from that perspective, but I think it might have felt just a touch more robust. But I will say I can understand, this is definitely far from being too small, but I think it's tough because I think having it like this helps the watch feel a little bit smaller. But I think if they would have had it a little bit larger, it would have helped maybe the watch feel a little bit more proportional. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I would say, from the side profile, when you look at it, you might think, okay, the crown could be a little bit bigger, but I think when you're looking at it head on, really no problems. Now, the case back is a display case back, and you can see that movement in there, guys. And one thing that the funny story is when this watch first released, at least that first 24 hours, they didn't have any pictures of the case backs. They actually were using like a bunch of random kind of stock footage and I think even some other models. And they don't specify which movement was in here. So a lot of us hit add to cart when we thought this was going to have the Miyota 9075, Traveler style GMT inside of it, which I think is pretty funny. But I think for the price point, it does make sense that it would have the NH in there. So just, a little bit of a lower beat count there at 3 hertz versus 4. You are getting still 41 hours of power reserve. And yeah, the beat rate of 21,600 vibrations per hour isn't too shabby. Now, the dial, it's, mostly going to be pretty flat and printed, but the nice thing is you're going to get those beautiful raised 3 indices, and they do glow very nicely. You do also have the date at 3 o'clock, and I like that they did the color matched disc, although it does eat into that 3 o'clock indice ever so slightly. I think it still looks quite balanced, so I don't mind it at all. Another nice feature here, guys, as you guys can see from the dial, you're going to get 200 meters of water resistance, which is awesome. So screw down crown, and even though you have a display case back, you're still going to get 200 meters of water resistance. So, nicely built from that perspective. Getting into the lugs, a nice thing here is you're going to see boxed lugs, which typically you would see, there's certain genres of watches that have this, whether they be more, motorsports with a tonneau case, or skin divers will typically have this type of box lug setup, which is nice because it really makes any strap feel more like a fitted end strap, and you're not going to see the gap there. So that's pretty cool. And, if they ever do bring a bracelet option, the nice thing is, that'll totally work. And it does have a similar box lug end to the one that the James Brand collaboration had. So that could also possibly be coming in the future. We'll see. I think it's cool. And then you get this silicone strap, which doesn't taper. It's 20 millimeters, quick release spring bars. It does have a matching titanium pin buckle that is nicely signed, and it all works really well, guys. And to show you how well it works, why don't I just get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears really, really well. The case shape, the contours, I do like, again, that they did choose to go with the matte blast here, and it does help in terms of softening some of these lines. And the nice thing is, yeah, it does have some softer lines, but thanks to the matte blasted finish, it's not like it's, it looks purposeful in terms of the softness, right? Versus if this was brushed and it had some soft lines, then it would just look maybe a little unfinished. So I think this looks really great, really clean. Of course, it would be nice if the lines and the transitions were just a touch sharper, not sharp to the touch, but just more so sharp to the eye in terms of the execution. But again, this is a watch that this is like $500, so you can't get too upset. Of course, I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens. You're going to get a bit of perspective distortion, and it's going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get just a bit more of a detailed look, but just at a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And now you guys can see that you are getting a lot more visibility of the sides of the strap here on the sides of your wrists, and it does help the watch center more, and I think it looks quite good, guys. Look at that. Now, this isn't some slim dress watch by any means, but at 13.5 millimeters and 200 meters of water resistance and a rotating bezel. Also, you got to remember, with a GMT, you're going to have extra height on the hand stack because you have an extra hand there. So with all of those factors, I think it's completely fine that this is as thick as it is. Now, if they could get it thinner, that's always icing on the cake. That's always a bonus. Maybe, I didn't handle the James Brand variation, in the metal. So I don't know if it was thinner. I know sometimes unfortunately, the dimensions that sites list can be, just measured oddly. Like, I think here they just show the case thickness. They don't mention the case back or with the bezel or the crystal included. So it's just one of those things, right? But I think this looks great. It's very handsome, very clean, and it's just very wearable. I like that this is this adventure type of watch, but it really inspires you to wear it and abuse it almost to a certain extent. Like, you put this on and you're inspired to go have fun with it. There are some other adventure watches that I will say, because of how expensive they are, or the prestige or the collectability, you just don't necessarily get that same feeling. And I will say I enjoy this feeling of strapping this to my wrist and feeling like, ooh, I can take this on a hike. I can go do that. I can take this to the beach. I can just take this on a trip and I'm not worried about it whatsoever. So yeah, I don't know. There's something about that. It's very empowering. It's exciting. But with that said, let's actually get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, the Lume is fantastic, guys. I will say the handset, not quite as bright. Maybe it's just as comparison because of how good those indices are with the 3D blocks, but I mean, it does a great job. And again, this is not a dive watch, although it does have diver's level of water resistance. This is a traveler / adventure watch, and I think it does a really good job with that. Now, of course, one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And although this is a matte finish, it doesn't feel ultra flat, which I like. There's still just a touch of shimmer there. Then, of course, you do have some of those geometric lines from the edges of the case, although they're a little softer. Again, this also isn't some super expensive timepiece. No, it's not cheap at around $500, but I mean, considering that this is a Timex, which is a, you know, it's a name brand. Maybe, yes, of course, Timex is known for their affordable pieces. I love the fact that they're stepping into this arena where they're just going for it, and they're putting out some pieces that are definitely more enthusiast oriented. And they do have some enthusiast oriented ones that are just at a lower price point, right? They do have some really cool retro pieces, and you know, I'm always going to have respect for the Timex brand, and a lot of it has to do with, you know, my history. I mean, gosh, I've probably had so many Timexes, and a few important ones. And like when I was in the Marine Corps, I think one of my first watches I bought in the PX as a recruit was a Timex. It might have been just a little Timex field watch. It had the Indiglow on it. It was so cool. So yeah, I love that. And then of course there's the Timex Ironman watches, and there's just so many cool ones, and it's a brand that has history. Yes, these are meant to be cheaper watches, and a lot of the history, you know, at least recent history, is going to be in affordability. But when you can get something like this, where they take the Timex name that still has that, you know, it's still a nice conversation piece, right? Not just a timepiece. I like that when they can do things like upspec. They could easily have just gone with a painted dial. They didn't. They went with the 3D Lume markers, and that, I think, just works because you do have more depth thanks to that hand stack. So it just makes sense for them to just do that little extra. I can appreciate that. I like that they went with this case shape that was different, and they didn't just reuse another one, right? Or just do a very generic case shape. I like that they did that. And, you know, it lets you know as well that, hey, yes, they checked out Tudor. They looked over at their notes, and they said, hey, look, we'll take some stuff that works. We'll also, you know, do a little bit of our own and put our own little spin on it. And I think they did a great job balancing that. So closing thoughts from me, guys. Nice and sporty wearing on the wrist. You know, it's not too bulky, but with a decent heft to it, especially for a titanium watch on a strap, right? This strap is very lightweight. The nice thing is it doesn't feel flimsy, right? It doesn't feel thin. It doesn't feel like it's going to fly off your wrist. It still feels relatively substantial. And I'll say that that is something that carries over for the watch case as well. Although it's titanium, thanks to, of course, the use of a mechanical movement, you are still going to get a little bit of that weightiness that does typically equate to quality in your mind from time to time. Now, in terms of model variants, there's really only one, at least thus far, which is, this is just a down-spec'd kind of and simplified variation of the more upscale James Brand Miyota 9000 series GMT limited edition from earlier this year. I would love to see more variations come out of this piece, though, because I think it's just that good. And I think, especially with this now as a platform, you know, doing a blue dial, doing a different type of strap, doing a bracelet option, I think there's a lot of cool stuff that can come come from that, and yeah, I'm digging it. So then in terms of comparable models, I think considering Timex's brand history, you know, their mainstream visibility and the movement choice, come on guys, the Seiko 5 SSK GMTs are definitely a natural competitor. At just under $500, those go for $475, while Timex offers a titanium construction for a bit over $500 at $549. So while the Seiko SKX K-style, you know, they have a really strong following, thanks to, you know, years and years of development and generations of collectors now, I could also see the Expedition North GMT gaining future variations in colorways eventually, right? So I think that that's cool. Again, I think this is a really great starting point. I would love to see them just do a couple other color variations, maybe a couple different finishes that they could try. But I mean, even if they just did different color dials and different color accents, you know, obviously I feel like with Iron Man and Timex and the Expedition, the yellow is going to be a constant. But I mean, this with a blue dial would look fantastic. This with a white dial or a creamy dial, I think that would look great as well. So, you know, of course they would have to figure out some black borders if they did a lighter dial, but I don't know. For me, there's a lot to like here. So for the bottom line, from that perspective, I would say while I was disappointed to find that they ditched the lovely Miyota 4Hz Travelers GMT in favor for the more affordable Seiko 3Hz Caller GMT movement, the Seiko is no slouch, and you know, it does align well with the Expedition's down and dirty adventure appeal quite organically. So, you know, I can't really fault them for the choice. It makes sense at the end of the day. And although the Miyota at this price point, you know, if they would have done that they could have just really been class leading in terms of value, because even smaller micro brands that haven't been around longer than 10 years that are putting these movements into watches are typically going to be $650, $700, $800. There's been $1,000 watches with that movement in it. So, I mean, if they were to get to sell that for around $550 or $600, they could have definitely been pretty leading edge there, considering that they are Timex at the end of the day. So there's some brand cachet there. So yeah, you know, and in terms of having it with the Seiko movement, now your range of comparables shift a little bit, and I think they're more or less average in terms of value proposition when you do kind of compare this to the field of other watches that are powered up by the same movement. I will say that, yes, there are cheaper watches, there are more expensive ones, but, you know, it's always a trade-off, it's always a mix. There's nothing like, hey, on paper, this is definitely better than that, because people have different wants and needs. Not everybody wants more water resistance. Some people want more thinness, right? So having a screw-down crown and 200 meters of water resistance, that might not be a selling point for somebody, or you know, so that's something to think about. Or having it matted, somebody might want something a little shinier, or something that feels a little bit more refined for daily use, versus this is going to be definitely more of that kind of functional look to it, right? So that really tool aesthetic. So with that said, let me know down in the comments below what you guys all think. If you liked the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.